Today we will figure out one of the greatest questions I've ever conceived in my life and probably in the whole world. How come we don't shoot nuclear waste into space? And my only question is, how come we don't shoot regular old garbage into space? Because space is infinite. It'd be like an infinite garbage can, and unless it's gonna make like meteors of garbage crash down, then maybe. But I don't know. Let's see. Wait a second. What
What
do
is
you
up,
give?
everyone?
Kurzgesagt Labs, we test very important ideas to see what happens when you blow things up or play with black holes. Many of you suggested that we look into an idea that sounds reasonable: shooting nuclear waste into space. It's one of those concepts that seems like an easy fix for one of the main problems with the nuclear energy, but it's
I think the main problem is it might uh come in contact with some aliens or get infused with some space powers and become sentient and then kind of destroy Earth. That's where my head is at.
turns out this idea is not just bad, but horribly bad, and it gets worse the longer you think about it.
Talk to me.
Why is that? What is nuclear waste? Nuclear waste is a fuzzy term and comes in categories which vary from country to country. But in general, there are three broad levels. 90% is low-level nuclear waste, tools, gloves, or trash used at a nuclear facility that could be weakly contaminated with some short-lived radioactivity. This stuff is generally safe for normal disposal. 7% is intermediate-level nuclear waste, mostly materials that have been in close proximity to a reactor core long enough to become dangerously radioactive. With proper handling, it's either safe.
You know what I really hate about like Marvel and all that? I genuinely think that if a nuclear power plant were to explode, we would get superpowers. I don't know. Maybe we'll all, you know what I'm saying, meet God or meet the devil, depending on how you lived your life. But someone has to get superpowers at that point.
Safely buried or melted down and mixed into glass or concrete and stored deep underground. So 97% of nuclear waste is similar to toxic byproducts from other industries. Not great, not terrible. We can handle it. The remaining 3% is where our problems begin. High-level nuclear waste is very concentrated spent fuel taken out of a reactor core. Formerly uranium, it's now made of various dangerous and often highly radioactive elements. As a bonus, it's also incredibly hot and not easy to handle at all. This is what we want to shoot into space. All in all, around 440 active nuclear reactors create about 11,000 tons of high-level nuclear waste each year. Since 1954, we've accumulated 400,000 tons of dangerous radioactive waste.
Damn.
Most countries are dealing with it by not dealing with it and kicking the can towards the future. Great, so let's launch it into space. According to scientists, space is big, and nobody lives there, so it seems perfect for yeeting away this mess.
Yeah.
There are a few tiny problems, though. Problem one, stuff ain't cheap. Even though spaceflight is getting more affordable, it's still extremely expensive. Just to get something into low...
Then just do it like what? Just do it every 10 years. You don't need a good rocket. You need a rocket that can just make it into space and then just leave it. You don't need, you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you make a cheap rocket and it falls down, and then kind of just, nah, just make a decent rocket and get it up into space. If they're able to do it in the 90s, I'm pretty sure, like with the new age technology, we can get a mediocre spaceship with nothing but inanimate objects in it into space. So every 10 years.
low Earth orbit costs on average about $4,000 per kilogram. Putting that into perspective, it costs about $1,600 to mine, separate, and fabricate 1 kilogram of nuclear fuel, so launching waste into space has suddenly made nuclear fuel for reactors way more expensive. and greatly increased the cost of the electricity they produce. To launch one reactor's worth of nuclear waste would cost at least $100 million per year. To deal with all the 440 operational nuclear power plants' high-level nuclear waste would cost some $44 billion per year for space launch before packaging, transport, and security costs are added.
Yes, I do it every 10. Cool. Man, I don't lie. They should hire me. I'm really just fixing the world right now.
Okay, let's pretend we don't care. Currently, we couldn't shoot all the nuclear waste into space even if we wanted to. There just aren't enough rockets. In 2021, we saw a record 135 launches into space. If we repurposed each of those rockets and filled them all with nuclear waste, the total amount that could be lifted into a low Earth orbit, which is the closest orbit above the atmosphere, is nearly 800 tons. We'd need at least 14 times more rockets to handle just today's nuclear waste, let alone get rid of the hundreds of thousands of tons in temporary storage. We would need to create entire new space industries to keep up with the demand.
Why not make bigger rockets? I don't know. I'm just putting up shots right now.
For giant, toxic space trash trucks. And it gets worse. Problem 2, space is hard. We only made the calculation for low Earth orbit, where we send most of our rockets and satellites. Littering the space around Earth with thousands of casks of spent nuclear fuel would be a nightmare for space junk management and satellite collision avoidance. Worse still, at this altitude, there's There's still a little bit of atmosphere causing a tiny bit of drag, so we might have nuclear waste raining down from space within just a few years. Experts would call
You know what'd be crazy? If that's how we got superpowers. You have to get in the head, hopefully you survive, and then you just get superpowers. I mean, if it land... Yeah. Superpowers.
A huge problem. Clearly, we have to launch our waste further. If we wanted to send it to, perhaps, the moon, we either need way more rockets, or we need to build much bigger ones, making it even more expensive.
Can we get it to Jupiter? Because ain't Jupiter just a gas planet? Would it just blow up?
A single Saturn V, the rocket used by the Apollo program, which cost around $1.5 billion adjusted for inflation per launch, could get about 43.5 tons from the Earth to the moon. So we'd need about 260 Saturn V rocket launches every year. And of course, using the moon as target practice for nuclear waste-tipped rockets kind of makes a huge mess. So maybe don't aim for anything. Space is empty. Do we really need a target? Shooting waste in any random direction is, you guessed it, also a bad idea.
Why?
Orbits are loops, which means they have a tendency to come back to where they started. Put enough in the sky in random directions, and you'll get one back eventually. So we'd want to launch our nuclear waste deep into space, which means we need even bigger rockets that would be even more expensive. Not that we would be completely safe there.
Couldn't you just make faster rockets? Because why not make more focused precision launchers so you can actually like get far away?
Then Earth might run into these interplanetary caskets at some time in the far future and experience a pretty meteor shower made from radioactive dust. Okay, how about we shoot it into the sun?
Yeah.
Ironically,
Oh,
the
that'd blow up.
sun is pretty hard to hit. While the sun has very strong gravity, everything on Earth is moving with respect to the sun, including the rockets that we launch, meaning a rocket would have to cancel out all the orbital motion it has around the sun so it can stop orbiting and fall in. Because of this, it's actually easier to launch a rocket entirely out of the solar system than it is to launch it into the sun. But to do either of these things, we need even bigger rockets, probably the biggest we've ever built. Nothing works. The thing is, it gets even worse. Problem 3, rockets go brrr. Rocket engineering has taken huge steps since the Apollo era. We've made them relatively safe. We've mostly replaced the toxic explosive cancer fuels of the past decades with much saner mixes of liquid oxygen and hydrogen.
Alright, boom. Why do we need rockets? Why not just send them like projectiles into space? Use the same rocket launcher they use for rockets. Put that in a cannon. Boom! And just let it fly.
Or kerosene. The newest designs even land themselves so that they can be reused. And yet, out of the 146 launches in 2021,
Yeah, do my original idea of put in a rocket, send it into the rocket, have the rocket shoot it out, and then have the rocket come back, bro. That's
there were
smart.
11 failures, which means that a sizable number of our rockets carrying high-level radioactive waste would be exploding on the launch pad, or in the worst case, disassembling at high altitude or crashing from hypersonic speeds. Each failure would be at least equivalent to a mini Chernobyl, but instead of being contained under a slab of concrete, spread throughout the atmosphere. Radioactive particles could make their way to faraway places by riding on the winds. Most would fall into the ocean, but some would land on the inhabited parts of the world. They could cover farmlands and get concentrated into our food or enter our water supply, which is, well, bad. Imagine regular large-scale nuclear disasters happening. People wouldn't be happy. Conclusion and opinion part.
Get an assessment.
Nuclear waste is scary, but the fear of it, and horrible ideas like shooting it into space, reveals how bad we are at understanding risk. Because the largest amounts of radioactive elements like uranium and radon are actually released by coal. Burning millions of tons of coal each year leaves ash as a waste product that includes about 36,000 tons of radioactive materials. Less radioactive than high-level nuclear waste, but there's also a lot more of it, and it's handled way less carefully. Some of this ash is caught by filters, but most is simply pushed back into leaky mines, shoved into piles exposed to the wind, or poured into ponds that regularly spill into rivers and lakes. Living within 1.6 kilometers of an ash pile increases your cancer risk up to 2,000 times over.
Damn, usually I'd say, like, it doesn't matter to me because it'd be far away. But I live, like, I'm pretty sure I live in the radius he's talking about. I already live close enough to a power plant. So, Brita filters.
The acceptable limit. And this is on top of other toxic chemicals like heavy metals and, of course, their massive CO2 emissions. And yet, while nuclear energy is flawed and its current form may only be a transitory technology, nuclear power plants are a harder sell than coal. Nuclear waste and the lack of willingness to deal with it are a real issue. It's not insurmountable, though. There are good methods to handle it, like burying it deep underground or reprocessing some of it into new fuel. But however we ultimately deal with this issue, we hope one thing is clear. Shooting nuclear waste into space is one of the worst ideas ever. Researching this crazy thing, conducting all of...
Is it really the worst idea ever? People have thought of a lot dumber stuff. You feel me? It's a smart idea. If the universe didn't work as it does, that it's perfectly possible.
These important tests, and of course, creating this video, took us around 2,000 hours, which is insane for a YouTube video. And we couldn't do it without you. If you like what you...
Alright. So, I'm still, I agree with them 75%, but I'm pretty sure there's a way for us to send just a whole bunch of nuclear waste, garbage into space with no consequences other than that.